to win the tournament as a whole. It's a Tankcast tournament number 2, and we do see that the random player this time is Terran. So this is the first time I'm ever going to see Panerai play Terran. I saw him play 2 good games as Protoss. I just saw him play 2 as Zerg, but this is the first where I'm going to see him as Terran. And playing random, I feel, is very, very tough because it's hard to have so much knowledge about every single race in StarCraft. So mad props to Panerai for being able to play competitively as Terran, and of course also to Kilos, who plays a very, very solid Terran, as we have seen in the past 2 games. Now getting a supply depot down both players. Again, Kilos does not know what race Panerai is, which is why he is building his supply depot on the ramp. In case Panerai once again spawned a Zerg, he wants to be able to wall off his front to protect him from those Zerglings and low-range roaches. Kilos is now scouting, but it looks like he is going to scout Panerai last. He's going to go here, and then finally to the 3 o'clock, before finally finding that Panerai is at the 6 o'clock as Terran. Both players, looking at the production tab, have their barracks pretty much at the exact same time. And the Terran versus Terran mirror match often goes into a very static Siege Tank Viking mix, although there has been some new builds from like a pro player named Vile Akoic, which consist of getting lots of Vikings and lots of Banshees, as well as Hellions to burn the rest of your minerals. So we'll see if any players decide to do that, or if we'll see Tank Viking, or if we'll see Marine Marauder play this game. Both players, once finishing their barracks, are going to get their orbital commands. However, you do see Panerai deviating a little bit by getting a second barracks actually way off in the corner right here. So that's a very, very interesting play, putting his barracks in the corner there, so even when Kilo scouts him, he's not going to see that extra barracks. This Marine should be able to shoo off that SCV and keep him from scouting around.
He's going to think it's a proxy rack.
He may, yeah, we'll see if Kilos realizes the fact that there is 150 minerals missing from Panerai's base, if he realizes that there is a barracks or some sort of, funky play coming out from Panerai. And of course, Kilos is just doing similar builds, but he did get his refinery earlier and has a lot more gas than Panerai could ever have because he delayed his refinery in order to get his barracks. I mean, ever have at that point in time. And now we do see Kilos, instead of getting that second barracks like Panerai did, he is getting the factory. And we're going to have to see where he goes with that, whether he's going to tech up quickly to Starport or if he's going to play a lot on the factory tech. And this barracks is just sitting in the corner, just making Marines. It's rather interesting. I'd like to see where this build goes, but he is doing a very fast expansion now, with 2 barracks making Marines, and he is getting his command center already at his natural. He has a single SCV going to take the tower, and he may do a little bit of aggression with these Marines, at least enough to, keep Kilos on his feet and keep him from being too confident. In addition, we do see Panerai now taking a second gas, and Kilos being solidified off of 2 refineries already, now getting the starport as well as the tech lab, so we may see a switch for either an early Raven or already for some Banshees, both of which are very, very possible and very, very lethal in Terran vs. Terran. As the Raven, in air-to-air battles against Vikings, a single Raven can really turn the tide. Even if you are a few Vikings down, the point defense drone can just soak up so many attacks from the Vikings that your air army will have a very big advantage. But here are a lot of Marines, a single SCV pushing up onto the ramp of Kilos, and the SCVs of Panerai will be able to take out those Marines of Kilos, and because he has so much extra Marines, he can actually take down the supply depot right here. And what are we going to do? We have a siege tank coming out, but we do see that Kilos is now down 1 supply depot, and he's losing all of his Marines to the Marines of Panerai. He is now pulling SCVs. He does have a single siege tank. The SCVs are repairing the siege tank, and that looks like it will repel Panerai, at least for the moment. We'll see if he pushes back up now that he has 2 extra Marines, or if he's going to flee. That siege tank has 2 kills and was able to turn the tide of that battle. It is not every day you see a single siege tank in tank mode, being very, very useful for a Terran player. However, Panerai does have his expansion up and running, which is something Kilos does not have, and he's already getting his orbital command. So those mules plus the extra mineral patches to mine off will soon give Panerai a very tangible economic advantage, even though he's down a couple of harvesters. He's also getting infantry weapons, which signifies that he's not going to go some sort of crazy tech play or air play. He's going to try and stick with Marine Marauders. Or we'll see if he gets Marauders. Right now he's going pretty much all out Marines, but siege tanks, which it looks like is what Kilos is going, can really put a damper in mass Marine. And then we do have Vikings. Vikings are rather typical in Terran games because you can use them to extend the vision of your siege tanks, and also it's great to have air control in any sort of matchup, just in general. And there was a tank drop from Kilos. The tanks are going to be picked up, and if this medevac drops, actually, he will lose 2 tanks unnecessarily, but it looks like the medevac will be able to get away without too many losses for Panerai, and no losses at all for medevac for Kilos or his medevac as long as they get repaired by SCVs later on. And we do have an extra, now we have a factory and a starport, so Panerai is up to starport tech now. And he does have a tech lab on his factory, but only getting Hellions from that at the moment. And we do see these 2 Vikings now moving in, perhaps just to scout into Panerai's base to see what they can see. And Panerai does see the Vikings are coming in, so Kilos is going to be forced to retreat with the Vikings. Now the factory and the starport still sitting here. I'm very curious to see as to what Panerai is going to do. He is going to put... Well, the Vikings are going to get a couple free shots off right now. Factory, starport once again is going to land. And we do have the command center finally being built by Kilos. Kilos' Marines are staying, or Panerai's Marines are staying up at his main to try and hit the Vikings as they go by. And one of Kilos' Vikings are actually taken down by the Marines, which is a mistake on Kilos' part. Should have kept them safe. He does now have siege tech as well as 3 siege tanks and is building his 4th, so he has a definite advantage in any sort of ground engagement in the near future. Actually, he has 5 siege tanks with a 6 coming up, so Kilos definitely, with the siege mode, can just wail on the Marines and Marauders of Panerai, but he is now making 4 more barracks, so he's going very, very heavy infantry this game, and he's probably going to be going dual medevacs to support his mass infantry army, in addition to getting siege tanks, and I assume siege tech whenever he remembers to get it. However, there is an engagement right now, and if you look at the army counts, Panerai is just way behind the army count of Kilos. He does stim, and if he gets up on to the siege tanks, he could do a lot of damage. Siege tanks do have a minimum range, so they can attack units right on top of them. So actually, all those siege tanks were taking out. That was a really, really bad play on Kilos' part. There was a problem with his composition. He had too many tanks and not enough units to support the tanks. The tanks can be very, very useful, but only if they can sit back and do damage without getting hit themselves. Because he didn't have enough Marines and Marauders to slow down Panerai's units, Panerai was able to get right on top of them into the minimum range of the tanks and then take him out. And as we can see, we're just getting mass barracks from Panerai. He is now going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 barracks, a lot of them even with reactors. So just pure infantry from Panerai, not even going for siege tanks, and then just going Marine Marauder medevac. Kilos has finally now secured his expansion, so the incomes should be rather similar. Kilos on the income tab does have higher income, but that is just due to the mules at the moment. But the army count does show that Panerai does have a small lead in terms of army, and he is also getting his 3rd, so he will be able to, keep on mining more than Kilos as soon as that 3rd comes up, especially if it's an orbital command and he gets extra mules. But if you just look at the production tab, you do see an armory now coming down from Panerai, so I'm going to say most likely that's to get level 2 infantry attack and weapons, attack and armor. I don't believe he's going to go for Thors or for any sort of vehicle upgrades. And we do see Kilos now scouting out Panerai's base. His Viking's getting a couple shots off on Panerai, and he better flee with this medevac. Doesn't want to lose the Marauders inside, and he was going for a Marine Marauder drop, but the single Viking actually doing a really good job at slowing down that drop, although he did eventually die. We see that Kilos actually got himself supply locked, and maybe a little bit of an overreaction right here, building 4 supply depots as well as a supply drop right there, but regardless, he is finally getting Stimpack. This is probably the latest I've ever seen Stimpack be researched in a game. It's a very important upgrade, but you can see Kilos is going very, very, very heavy siege tank, which makes sense in order to counter this really heavy Marine Marauder ball. But he is going to need something more than just siege tanks. You can't really play pure siege tank. That's not a very effective army, especially if Panerai loads up into medevacs and drops on top of the siege tanks. And then we do see that Kilos is also getting his third, so he doesn't want to fall too far behind Panerai in terms of the economic game. And here's a drop. 3 medevacs loaded with Marines and Marauders dropping right into Kilos' base. They're going to be able to take down this tech lab that was retracing a stim pack. So Kilos still is without stim. And the slow tanks really need to unsiege and come up here to support the rest of Kilos' army, because Kilos' Marines are being taken out by the Marines and Marauders with stim and medevac support. The few siege tanks that came up are going to die. And I do not know why Kilos is not bringing the rest of his tanks up. He is going to be able to take out the medevacs apparently with the Kilos, anyway. Kilos has to say GG because he lost pretty much all of his Marines, so much of his tanks, and he had just 8 Marauders in the middle of his base. So